Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. It's just about 3:30. So thank you everybody for attending this session, the last session of the day. My name is Lisa Gabbert, and I'm an associate professor in folklore studies at Utah State University. And we're just very grateful that everybody came. I'm going to start off with just a few introductory comments talking about this project before I introduce our main researchers. And oops, that was the wrong, oh, there it is. What I'd like to do first is just give USU's land acknowledgement statement, which is, as a land grant institution, Utah State University campuses and centers reside and operate on the territories of the 8 tribes of Utah who have been living, working, and residing on this land from time immemorial. The tribes are the Confederated Tribes of the Gosh-Ute Indians, Navajo Nation, Ute Indian Tribe, Northwestern Band of Shoshone, Paiute Indian Tribe of Utah, San Juan Southern Paiute, Skull Valley Band of Gosh-Ute, and the White Mesa Band of the Ute Mountain Ute. We acknowledge these lands carry the stories of these nations and their struggles for survival and identity. We recognize elders past and present as people who have cared for and continue to care for the land. In offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous self-governance, history, experiences, and resiliency of the Native people who are still here today. And I think that's, given the, all of that's been said today at the conference, that is important to remember. So. Okay, my panelists today are 2 master's degree students here in the public history program at Utah State University, Sadie, Nellis, and Hovan, Lawton. And before we go on, I would like to thank the Utah Humanities Council because they funded some of the transcriptions for the oral histories as part of this project. And so for some of you, there's scattered audience evaluation sheets. And if you could just fill out one of those sheets and just pass them up front or leave them on the seats before you go, I would be very grateful. That would be really nice. So anyway, this project started as part of a fieldwork graduate seminar in folklore and oral history that I teach at Utah State, a graduate seminar. I teach it about every other year or so. And it's generally based on a collaborative model of doing ethnographic fieldwork that is also community-based. So we choose a project, and then we do essentially oral history and folklore fieldwork training, where students are trained in interviewing techniques, doing participant observation or observation ethics. We do IRB protocols. They're trained in the use of technology. And then the students really, it's a student-driven process. So they do background research on the project. They come up with the questions with some modifications and input, things like that. But it's really student-driven as much as possible. And so in terms of this particular project, of course, Beaver Mountain is apocryphally known as the longest continuously operating family-owned ski resort, and it's been, in the Seeholzer family since 1939, and it's, really closely connected with the local culture of Cache Valley. So I met with Travis Seeholzer, who's the manager there, and discussed the project and got his approval. And so we ended up doing 18 oral history interviews with not just members of the Seeholzer family, but also friends, skiers, employees, volunteer ski patrol. We got a lot of ski patrol in there. The ski shop manager, and so on. And so at the end of the project, what we will have is a digitally born collection, which includes the audio files, the transcripts, photographs that the students took, any paraphernalia, memorabilia that people wanted to donate will be put in special collections. And then from the student end, ideally they come away with a sort of a portfolio of their own fieldwork as well that they can use, on job searches or for future projects if they'd like. I came to this interest or to this particular project, I'm interested in folklore and oral history and issues of community. I've done similar projects with other students at one was at the Triangle X Dude Ranch in Grand Tetons, also with ranchers in northern Utah, and one on refugees in Cache Valley. But this project is close to my heart, just as a lifetime skier. And I wrote a book a while ago now on a winter carnival in the McCall area, which has connections to Brundage Mountain and lots of local ski history there. And of course, in doing that research, I found out how closely Brundage Mountain is related to the Engen family, and of course, Alta generally. So also interestingly, lots of connections to early dog racing in Utah in the winter dog races. So anyway, a project on Beaver Mountain to me just seemed obvious, and I was really happy to do it, and I hope to continue to work on it in the future. I think it ties into the conference theme on water in a couple of ways. First, as the ski industry, continues to reorganize into sort of ever expanding multinationals, I think it's really important to gather the perspective, on the importance and meaning of these sort of small, local, family-owned resorts that still exist. And second, with the ongoing nature of climate change and severe drought, the ski industry and winter outdoor recreation will continue to be impacted. But the majority of research on skiing and climate change and water does tend to, with the exception of the history folks here, focus on sort of ecological, recreational, and economic impacts. And I think those perspectives are really important, but there's not as much attention, I think, to what I would characterize as sort of the cultural impacts, sort of the meanings and understandings and attitudes, how water creates community, essentially. And in skiing and ski culture in particular, the formal history is pretty well documented. The Utah Ski Archives are an amazing resource. The Engen family has been very well documented, but sort of, what are the perspectives of the users and the people who work there and sort of the ordinary people for whom this has been, a kind of lifelong sense of community and a lifelong project. So the interviews, the people in the interviews reflect on kind of what skiing and Beaver Mountain specifically means to them, what's changed over time, some concerns about climate change and the globalization of the ski industry, and the relationship between skiing, community, friends, and family. And I think what they illustrate is that water is definitely much more than an economic resource, and that its sort of cultural dimensions for ways of living warrant additional in-depth exploration. So again, I'll introduce my panelists. This is Sadie, Nellis, and Hovan Lawton. They are both second-year students in the master's program in public history at Utah State. They are the ones who, along with their classmates, really did the work, and they're going to present some of their findings to you. So please welcome.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming today. This is my first conference presentation, and I look forward to giving you my thoughts about this project and sort of the information we pulled from it about how water can be a cultural resource. So over here on the slides is a brief outline of what we will go through. I'll begin with a history of Beaver Mountain, just to add context of the place we're talking about, and follow that with some ideas of core relationship values that are foundational to the Beaver Mountain community. Hovan will then go on to explain the diversity and the family-friendly characteristics known to Beaver Mountain. And he will conclude with thoughts about the future for the community. Just to note, this presentation is the preliminary stages of research. We also are focusing only on the oral histories we collected for the class. So there's no other perspectives from skiers at other resorts. And it's basically just to present some ideas about one ski community in Utah rather than the ski community at large. So the history of Beaver Mountain, it began with a small tow rope powered by a car engine put together by a local ski club in Cache Valley in 1939. Harold and Luella Seeholzer, members of this club and locals of Logan, decided to buy it from the club in 1945 when it was put up for sale. And they formed the Beaver Mountain Ski Resort in 1961, along with their children, and owned and operated that with them until Harold died just 7 years later. And the kids took operation for owning shares in the business for nearly 20 years. In 1997, their son Ted decided with his wife Marge that they would purchase all of Beaver Mountain from all of his siblings, and they have owned and operated Beaver Mountain since then with their son and daughter. Since 1945, the resort has gone through major changes, but slower than other big corporate resorts, ski resorts. They've added lifts and upgraded them, and they built their lodge and ticket office by hand as much as they could. This was very much built from the ground up by the Seeholzer family. And prior to COVID, Beaver Mountain was mostly known and used by locals and neighbors of Cache Valley. But during COVID, we learned that because they had less restrictions at their resort, more skiers from the nation came to Beaver Mountain and grew to love it. And they've had an increase in visitors in the last few years. So that is brief history. And now I'll go into snow. Snow is this frozen form of water. When placed on a mountainside and with the right equipment, turns into this recreational use that brings people together based on their love for this skiing or snowboarding. And Beaver Mountain is one case study of a ski community that is centered and founded on this love of snow. Ultimately, we hope to show how snow is a cultural resource that has built this distinct community and the culture within it. So while reading through the oral histories, I found 3 sets of core relationship values that influence how relationships are formed in the community of Beaver Mountain, which include home and family, caring and compassion, and generosity and inclusivity. In the next slides, I'll go through some quotes that highlight these and share some thoughts. So home and family ultimately begins with the Seeholzer's feelings and encouragement that Beaver Mountain is their home and everyone who visits it is their extended family, which is also embraced by their guests. And Marge Seeholzer, who is the current president of Beaver Mountain and the lead runs the ticket office, she shared this feeling in this quote from her interview.
We feel like our guests are extended family, and they kind of feel that way too.
That's right. So we feel like our guests are extended family, and they kind of feel that way too, because we've encouraged them to be part of the family. I feel like Beaver is my home, and I want my home to always be nice and clean. And when my guests come, I want it to be presentable. So this belief of feeling like people are family coming to their home directs and how Beaver Mountain is run and organized, but also influences how everyone, workers and visitors, interact with each other. There is a feeling on the mountain that is one of looking out for each other and making sure everyone is safe. And then Marge also really exhibits this value, I think, by working in the ticket office full time. As the owner of this resort, she makes sure every visitor receives a warm welcome as they come into the ticket office, and a personal hand-stamped ticket, which is not common in today's digital world. But it's very important to her. And she recognizes when she's giving out tickets to new generations of skiing families that come to their resort. And it's something that she really loves about her job. So this feeling of home and family seems to be a bedrock for the two other core sets of values that I'll discuss.
We feel like
Caring and compassion for individual visitors influences the quality of relationships in the Beaver Mountain community. John Dijkstra is a local skier who began his relationship with Beaver Mountain in 1964 as a young boy learning to ski. He describes his feelings about feeling cared for in the Beaver Mountain community with this quote: "There's some genuine caring and compassion, and I would say I'm not the only one, that Marge does that too. She does that to everybody. And I think the feeling is what makes Beaver so good in the valley. You see, everybody just loves it. Everybody talks about how wonderful Beaver is. If you go to a big ski area, you're a small fish in the ocean, where at Beaver, they make you feel like the big fish in the small pond." So here he's explaining how feeling cared for individually makes him feel valued and like a big fish in this sea of other big fishes. This aspect shows up I think, in the way that Beaver Mountain runs their ski school, where the director teaches classes to beginner skiers. At bigger resorts, more advanced ski instructors are reserved for more advanced skiers and tend to cost more. So having the director, who is the most advanced instructor in their ski school, not only teach the beginners, but also want to teach them and loves to teach them. I think that shows how the Beaver Mountain community values every individual, no matter their skiing level. Another way this shows up is through the longtime workers who know the names of regular skiers and seek to connect with the visitors. Rather than seeing visitors as objects to load as quickly as possible onto a lift, these lifties, the workers who operate the lifts, they use that time to get to know the individual names and show that individual care. So last but not least, generosity and inclusivity, I believe, is another core value in the Beaver Mountain community. I think this is most readily recognized in the relationship between Beaver Mountain and the nonprofit organization Common Ground Outdoor Adventures. Common Ground, like I said, is a nonprofit that provides outdoor activities to anyone with disabilities, and their relationship with Beaver Mountain has been there for decades and continues to grow each year. So before Ted died, they tried to find a way to get Common Ground a permanent location on the mountain to make it more accessible for their students and easier to transport their cargo. And Marge emphasized how important this was for Ted. They were able to make it work after Ted's death, and it was in a prime location. They really valued making sure that it was in a great spot. Alex Rister-Selly, the program director for Common Ground since 2016, shared his interactions with Beaver Mountain over the years and their generous and inclusive characteristic. He shared that their volunteers are allowed to ski on the mountain for free after giving classes. They receive season passes to auction off at their yearly fundraising event. Their students get to use the ski school line, which tends to be faster and better overall, given their abilities. And the lifties know the students. But he succinctly summed up his thoughts and noted that the Seaholzers show this generosity to everyone in the community with this quote. Something has to be said that the entire community, all of Cache Valley, all of Northern Utah, Garden City, is better because the Seaholzers own Beaver Mountain. Because Beaver Mountain is here, this whole valley is better. They impact the entire community and they're a huge part of it. Part of that is also that they know everybody and everybody goes to them and asks for things. So I am so in awe and so blessed that we as a small nonprofit are able to get as much as they give us. And just by, just to sum this up, just by owning Beaver Mountain and having this access to snow and providing it to the community, the Seaholzers and the community of Beaver Mountain are able to give so much and make a difference in many people's lives. So those are my thoughts on these qualities. Now we'll pass it on to Hovan.
Something happened.
Hey, Holly, the sound files aren't playing. If you hit play back there, will they work? Oh, they're just really quiet. You can't hear them. Okay. I see. Okay, sorry. Yeah, we had them working. Okay, well, Hovan, it sounds like you'll probably just have to read yours. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
And then, yeah, there you go. Okay.
All right. And then the click. Okay, perfect. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Building on Sadie's discussion of the prevalence of relationship values in these interviews we did, I'll talk about a few other important themes from the oral histories. One repeated topic, particularly among members of the ski patrol, was that Beaver Mountain helps bring together diverse groups of people. One of the interviewees who emphasized this point was John Keith. John has been connected to Beaver since 1977 and has worked as a ski patroller since 1984. At 81 years old, he's now the second oldest patroller working at Beaver. So I'll read a clip from our interview we had with John in which he emphasizes the diversity of the Beaver Mountain Ski Patrol. He says it's a really neat group of people. We had one of the members say that the Beaver Mountain Ski Patrol is the Smith and Edwards of Cache Valley. They've got a bit of everything. For me, it's a wonderful opportunity to meet people you'll never meet otherwise. And I guess just to clarify, Smith and Edwards is a Northern Utah store whose slogan is, "We have everything you want if we can find it." John is emphasizing that the Beaver Mountain Ski Patrol similarly has a bit of everything.
It's a really neat group of people.
Okay. Our interviewees emphasized several different ways in which the ski patrol exhibits diversity. Like John mentioned in his interview, the ski patrol members come from a variety of careers, ranging from construction workers to salesmen to university professors. They also vary a lot in age, with young college students and retirees working side by side. Additionally, both men and women are on the patrol, and patrollers also hold a variety of political views, with conservative and liberal individuals working together and becoming good lifelong friends on the job. All these different people who, as John mentioned, likely would not have spent as much time together otherwise, are brought together by the collective love of skiing and the love of Beaver Mountain. This illustrates the power of water in its frozen form to bring people together. While many contemporary political debates regarding water use often lead to division and conflict, the Beaver Mountain Oral History Project illustrates that water in its frozen form can also bring diverse groups of people together in pursuit of a common end, winter recreation. Another important theme that multiple interviewees emphasized to us was the family-friendly nature of Beaver Mountain. For these individuals, being family-friendly means that Beaver is a place that feels accessible and welcoming for parents to bring their children to. One interviewee argued that Beaver feels more family-friendly than other ski resorts because of its compact physical size. One avid skier said, "It's very much a family feel at Beaver. You know everybody. And so when my kids were little, I did let them go ski on their own. Firstly on Little Beaver, and then on the whole mountain. I knew if they got stranded, they'd be in the middle of a run. And I knew someone would find them and bring them down if they were up there and needed help. On a bigger mountain, I would never have done that because who knows where they could have ended up." Of course, for others, Beaver's small size would be something negative, since it means there are less ski runs available to go on. However, at least for this parent, she appreciates Beaver's compact size, considering it to be ideal for introducing small children to skiing and allowing families with small children to go skiing together.
One thing that's unique about
Right,
all
here.
aspects of Beaver is that we're inexpensive compared to other ski resorts. And if people don't ski and you hear the prices, you think, well, that's not inexpensive. But ours compared to all the resorts in the Salt Lake area and the big Vail resorts, I worry that they're pricing families out of skiing because it's too expensive for them to come and bring their children.
Right, so this leads to a different way in which the interviewees felt that Beaver Mountain has a family-friendly aspect to it. And that's the affordable ticket price, and which makes it easier for larger families to feasibly buy ski passes for all their children. And as you can see in this clip from the interview, Marge Seeholzer says that providing accessibility for families with children is actually something the resort takes into account when setting their prices, because it's part of the atmosphere they want to maintain in their business. Right. Okay, looks like this part's a little bit out of order from what I have. I'm thinking about the future. As Marge Beaver Mountain has changed a lot over the 8 decades since it was founded. It will assuredly continue to evolve and change in the future. Change is often good. Like Sadie mentioned in her part of the presentation, when we asked interviewees if they miss anything about the way that Beaver Mountain used to be in the old days, they usually said no. They liked having actual ski lifts over simply throwing up a tow rope. Several of the patrollers also told us at length how much they loved their current ski patrol building, how they would never want to go back to the old days when they didn't have that building to use. Overall, infrastructural improvement was seen as something good and valuable for the resort. However, there are other potential changes that can make it hard for Beaver to provide the same positive experience to patrons that they have in the past. One of these possible threats to the resort's future is climate change. Multiple interviewees told us that in recent years, the resort has been receiving less and less snow, which seriously affects their operations. And here's a selection from Marge's interview, where she explains this issue.
We've had a few very lean years. We don't make snow, and we're one of the few left that don't make snow. We just depend on what Mother Nature blesses us with. And as the climate changes, that's getting a little more stressful. One year in 1976 and 77 was a terrible year. We hardly had any snow at all. We opened thinking we'd get more and weren't even able to stay open. We closed 2 weeks later. And it's a seasonal business, so that's even worse because you have to make all of your income in 4 months. And that was many years ago. We weren't as big then, but that was a huge hit for us. And I feel like because we've been frugal and we weren't in a lot of debt, that's the way we survived. I've seen ski resorts go under because of that happening, and they just lose everything.
This clip illustrates the importance of water as an economic resource at Beaver Mountain. If they get less precipitation, then it becomes harder and harder for Beaver Mountain to continue to be economically viable for its owners. However, as has been illustrated throughout this presentation, water is not only an economic resource at Beaver Mountain. Significantly, it is also an important cultural resource. Our interviewees highlighted to us how much Beaver Mountain means to them personally. They emphasize how the resort allows them to feel part of a community of people who, in spite of anything else that divides them, can all come together around snow sports. As a result, if a lack of snowfall ever causes Beaver Mountain to close, it would not only be the end of a ski resort, it would also be the end of this skiing community. Thank you. And we'll now take time to answer any questions that you have.
Monica.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I do have a question on if you could talk more about how your oral histories were collected, who you interviewed, how did you put that out there, I guess? How did you get the interviews?
Yeah, well, excuse me. I started with Travis, just talking about the project and obviously getting his blessing and he thought it was a good idea just to, the idea was to get kind of a variety of voices around the resort as much as we could within the context of the class. So basically he gave us suggestions for people and then the students basically had to find a second person. So each student did two interviews. And they were given the initial contact and whether that contact panned out, I think in most cases it did. And then they had to sort of use snowball sampling essentially to get the second one. One of the gaps that I noticed, which is why I'd like to do this again next time I teach the class and kind of continue to add is it tilted heavily towards men. So we do have a few women's voices in there, but it did tend to end up being a little more male heavy. Which we didn't really know. It's hard to tell until you get to the end when you figure out like, oh, who's actually, who's been interviewed and the interviews start coming in. So that's one correction I'd like to make. But that's how they found it, essentially. We had a lot of ski patrol. Ski patrol, I think maybe because they're volunteer and a lot of them are retired, were, quite happy, I think, to be interviewed.
Okay, so I have a very personal connection to Beaver Mountain. That's why I'm married to my husband. But there's the history of the Corduroy Gang, and Wayne's the last living one, but not doing too well, Wayne Rich. Is there any way to record some of that history of that posse that was such a part of the community for so many years?
If that person agrees to be interviewed, absolutely.
Okay.
What you could do is if you have suggestions, because like I said, I think this is sort of the first iteration, of the project. And what I would love to do is to be fed more names so that way, when we do it next time with the class, that I can give those names as the initial contact students and then for their group that. So maybe what I could do is just put my email up there.
Hey, call me if you've got stories.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you please expand on, what do you mean by the posse? There's a story there that us that aren't clued in don't know about.
There's a group of, well, they're all men, but I've skied with them as well. But decades, they skied every day. Wayne was skiing until he was 96 years old every single day. And there's a bench up at Beaver Mountain with a placard on it with the names of the original posse. And he's the last one to survive. Well, he's 99 now. But anyway, his brother, yeah, not wait till next year. Scott probably knows half of them. John. But that's a classic story that's about to be lost.
Thank you, guys. This is a great topic. Travis used to work for me for 3 seasons, and I worked for the Forest Service for 40 years up there. And Travis and Ted used to hire my people in the wintertime to run the ski, and then I'd hire his people in the summer to get them through college. But my connection with Beaver Mountain was through the U.S. Forest Service, and originally it was a Forest Service project. And Harry C. Holzer and the old forest supervisor were amazing people, and they explored that backcountry in the middle of winter when there were no roads up there. And when they finally selected Beaver Mountain, they brought in Alf Engen. You may know Alf from, he kind of had to approve that. And there's an amazing story about how they selected that. And I know Travis has all the old diaries of Harry's, and he's got them stuffed in there in a box. And I think you need to talk to him and tell him, let's get some of this stuff out, because the stories are great. And, you know, once the Forest Service transition, and now it's run by Sitla in the state, but in the 90s, it was a Forest Service kind of project. And there was so much tradition, so much camaraderie up there. And I remember all those people well, but thank you. And I urge you to keep going. There's so many great stories up there that you just need to get documented.
Sorry, I came in a little late, and I don't know if you went over this in the beginning, but how are you video recording the individuals, and how, like, what transcription like services or like the AI transcription are you using to like record the actual interviews themselves in addition to like all of the written information? So tell me a little about your process there.
Yeah, we are using archival standards. So we are using digital audio recording equipment. There's no video. Well, the students will take photographs, but so, you know, we're doing it in a particular setting on the audio recorders that have been determined to be sort of archival quality digital files. And then the same with the photographs. We're taking photographs with digital cameras. And I'm in the English department. So the English department essentially had purchased that equipment for the purposes of this class, and it's there for the students to use. So we spend time practicing and things like that. But, you know, that said, Terry Jordan is our current 5 folklore archivist. Before that, I was working with Randy Williams, who's the archivist before. You know, from the archivist position, they're always like, you know, get the best you can. But if it's not archival quality, it's still, you know, they'll take it. So they'll work with it. So right now we're transitioning out. We were using Tascam 100s, I think is the recorder, and we're because those have now gone out of line, and we're buying some like Zoom Handy. I think level 5s is the newest recording equipment, and so as those Tascams wear out, I think we'll buy the Zoom Handys because that worked pretty well this past time. And then we've got you know, external microphones. They're omnidirectional, pretty high quality microphones, so they get a pretty good recording most of the time.
And for our transcriptions, the students, we all had to transcribe one of the oral histories. And then the Utah Humanities Council grant supported the transcription of the other oral histories by paying for a professional transcriptionist to do that work.
We're very grateful to you. Please pull up
Very grateful.
evaluation so that they are happy.
So this is more for Sadie and Hovan. So I really love oral history. I'm sure as you all do too. It captures these stories, and like Sharon pointed out, who are the posses? Like, it's just a cool story. And anyways, going to that, did you two, when you were interviewing, you did both, didn't? Yeah. Did you find any stories about that? Like, was there something that struck you that your interviewee said that maybe you could share with us?
I mean, I think the most impactful experience during the project for me is, so each of us were in teams of two, where one person would be performing the interview, the other person would be handling the equipment. So in one of those interviews, the person I was teamed up with, Nellis, is part of this community. Her father is part of this community. She was married at Beaver Mountain. So just hearing her talking with the ski patroller we were interviewing, you could sense the deep roots that they had with one another and the connections that they shared. And I kind of felt a bit like an outsider, that they had this connection I wasn't necessarily a part of, but it was very meaningful seeing how much Beaver Mountain has impacted these people, how it really forms this community that goes far beyond just snow and skiing.
One fun story I had that Marge Seeholzer shared with me was back from the days when they only had radio and no telephone service on the mountain, which was really only like just over like 25, 30 years ago. And she said, and it was, I've heard her repeat this story in the interviews I listened to that she had done before with podcasts or such. And so it's something that she just finds so funny, and it is quite humorous. But there was on, I'm blanking on the name, Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day, the volunteer ski patrollers would be up on the mountain really early, and Marge would be at her home, and they would radio down to her and ask her to order flowers for their wives and bring them to their homes, because they had no way of contacting floral shops, and maybe they forgot beforehand. And so like for her, just this aspect of needing to use the radio, and they can only connect with Marge, and so they only have Marge connection. But now that I say that, another great story with Marge is that when she was on her honeymoon with her husband Ted, they had gotten married in like November, and on their honeymoon was the first snowfall of the season. And so Harry called Ted up and said, "You need to come home." And they left their honeymoon early just so that they could go and work at Snow Mountain now that people were coming in. So that's the life of the Seeholzers.
Just a comment on communication. The way Ted had that set up is on top of Logan Peak, there's a repeater. And from the top of Beaver Mountain with a 2-watt Motorola radio, you can hit that repeater. And so in the early days when they had emergencies, they could hit that repeater, and there'd be two sources. They could contact the Forest Service, or they could contact Cache County Dispatch. And in the case of emergencies, if somebody was hurt and injured and stuff like that, that's what they used to have to do. It was really tough. And I remember when they developed the technology so they could actually have a satellite phone. And this didn't come until the 90s, where they could actually, if it was life or death, they could use a satellite phone up there. And I think now they still can't get cell phone coverage up there, but they do have the internet. So you can use Skype, I guess, whatever you guys do now. But that was always a big thing. And the other big thing was getting power up there. And they didn't get that until the 90s. They had a diesel generator they had to run all the air. And to run the chairlifts and things. And they finally got a power cable that dug down there from Garden City. So they actually had electricity. And that was another big thing. So. What's that?
Oh yeah, I thought I saw your hand up.
No, I'm just, no, I didn't have my hand up. I wouldn't know where to start. I have so many memories of being on the mountain in the 70s and the Snoopy School. I mean, you talk about a community and culture. We were little kids who felt like we owned the place. We owned the mountain. And you're right. My mom would sit in the lodge and eat chili and drink wine and read her book, and we'd do whatever we wanted. You know, it was fantastic. You know, first snow would hit the valley, and everybody would start talking about Warren Miller and when he'd come to town and what was the new film going to be. And we, you know, get ready to go up to Kingsbury, make sure we had our tickets in hand. You know, it's just some great memories. I remember the jukebox that was in there, you know, and in the old lodge and everything, and just being there with my dad. I'm actually kind of getting emotional about it.
Well, I think that's what we found, or the students found. You know, there's a lot of people that they interviewed were, you know, it was very close to their hearts. They were, you know, it's a place that makes meaning for people, you know, and it does bring, you know, I mean, you have to be interested in school. Well, if you're not interested in skiing, you can go sit in the lodge, right, and let your kid go and read a book and drink wine. So you don't have to ski necessarily. One of the interesting things that's for me has been thinking about the development of these, you know, particularly the smaller ski areas in relation to sort of histories of technology, you know, because really you have these like very rugged outdoor Forest Service people and they're just rigging things up to make stuff work, you know, and so they're experimenting with all kinds of technologies in order to get people up the mountain and keep people warm and keep things functioning, you know. So it's really kind of a pioneer story in some ways, you know, of figuring stuff out and making do, I think, as even though we think of ski areas as being very sophisticated and very modern and all of that, but it's kind of can do as can do in a lot of ways. Yeah.
You know, that gave me another thought. I grew up skiing at Nordic Valley because that's where our family's cabin was, and it's another small resort. But I never felt the same connection to Nordic Valley as I did to Beaver Mountain. And I don't know if that's because there were so many other offerings in the area that it diluted that community. And so maybe the isolation is an important part, not just the size and the small budget, but just, yeah, it's just a unique thing at Beaver Mountain that you don't find anywhere else.
One small family owned, but you know, same. I do very kid friendly, very you know, the kids would be bused after school up the mountain, and they just they do their homework in the lodge. You know, is what those old ski clubs told me. So it's just interesting to think about those kinds of places and relationships to sort of small town living or small mountain town living.
I have a question. Did they talk about how the new resort in Richmond has affected their business?
No,
I don't remember
hearing anything about that.
yeah.
No, I don't remember. I listened to all of the interviews, you know, once they were turned in, and I don't remember anybody bringing that up. So that's it. But we didn't include that as a question.
Good to know.
Other questions or comments? I would really love it if you guys have, you know, more leads and good people to interview. Please come up and talk to me so I can make sure and get their names, because I really would like to, you know, continue this project in whatever iteration in the future. So, okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate you guys coming.